I kept asking the midwife, what can I do to like turn and like get this baby moving? And she really walked me through positions to get into. So I would switch from like my side with my knee up, one foot against the birth tub. And then I just kept doing that. All of a sudden I was like, I have to get on my hands and knees right now. And I did. And he was born. Like I heard my voice change. I was like, oh, I'm pushing. And it was more like fetal ejection reflex, which I'd only heard about. And I was like,
yes.
It sounds amazing. My midwife goes, oh, there's the head. Oh, there's the body.
Oh my gosh. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, hello, Eileen. Welcome. I'm so happy you're here with us today to share your story.
Oh, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. And I like to always open up with a little bit of an icebreaker. So if you could just tell everyone where you grew up, where you are at now in terms of, where you live, and then finally, what made you decide you wanted to go natural?
So I grew up in Pennsylvania and I now live in New Hampshire. And it's actually a really great place to be, especially for midwifery care, because there are a lot of options up here.
Nice.
And I went natural because I come from a family that tends more towards the natural approach to health in general. But my oldest sister actually kind of was the trailblazer in natural births. She had her first baby in a birth center and then her second baby in a birth center. And then her next 3 kids are all home births. And all of my sisters actually have had natural births. So when it was my turn, I was like, okay, I'm going to do a natural birth too. But I still didn't know as much about it as I thought I knew about it.
And this is what's so huge. I just want to pause here because you don't realize how much other people can influence us, right? I mean, you don't realize how much. What I'm trying to say is like my mom was a huge advocate of breastfeeding. And so when I got to that point where I delivered my baby, I was, going to feed him. I knew I'm going to breastfeed it because it's just what was ingrained. She talked about it all the time. I actually saw it as a kid. One of her friends had a baby and was nursing. And so to have your sisters, blaze this trail for you was huge.
Yes.
And what I'm trying to say too is every time we have a natural childbirth or we go through an unmedicated birth, we are actually creating a ripple effect that gives hope and inspiration for other people. Like, oh my gosh, they did it. Maybe I can do it. And so you are like a change agent when you do that. So it's so awesome that your sisters kind of showed you a way. And so you're like, okay, I'm going to try this too.
And my mom actually, my oldest sister, they were living in Liechtenstein at the time. So she actually had a midwife because that's the normal care there. And it was a hospital midwife. So she definitely was the start. And her mom was very naturally minded too. She actually cured her first bout of cancer naturally and everything like that. And then her mom breastfed her and all her 8 kids. And then my mom breastfed. So yeah, it's so true. I mean, the community around you is totally going to influence how you go into birth.
Yes. And, not all of us are blessed in that way. And that's why you have to create kind of digital groups, or that's why we have the Mom Natural Birth course. Just, you got to find your community to give you that support if you don't have it just surrounding you. Yeah. Now, how many kids was in your family? It sounds like you've got a lot of sisters. How many kids did your mom have?
I have 5 sisters and 1 brother.
Oh my gosh. Big family. And then your mom, it sounds like she had 8 siblings or she was from a big family. It's like a long line of, my mom was one of 6. So she had a lot of kids in her family, but yeah. Okay. So let's dive in. So during your pregnancy, let's just talk a little bit about your pregnancy. This is your 3rd pregnancy. Did anything surprise you about your pregnancy? Was anything kind of different?
Yes. So halfway through this pregnancy, I was downstairs, cleaning the basement like a maniac and
nesting probably.
Yeah. And I lifted something that was too heavy and I felt something shift and I was like, oh, I don't know what I just did. And then after that, I ended up having symphysis pubis dysfunction for the rest of the pregnancy. And so that was really hard because I stopped exercising and I could still do some things, but I had been really into exercising. It was the first pregnancy where I was really good about it. And then I hit this and I was in a lot of pain and everything like that. So then I started going to the chiropractor and that offered a lot of relief, but that was the big shock for me. I was like, whoa, 3rd kid, my body's feeling it.
Oh, that is brutal where you're just like, oh my gosh, what just happened?
Yeah.
Now, did you find, so chiropractic care was huge, which makes total sense. Did you do any maternity belts or ice or any kind of ritual like that also helped with that pain?
Yes. I wore basically the Bow Bay belly band all the time because it's super comfortable, but it also just works really well. So I basically wore that every day.
Oh, gosh, that's hard. I remember one time when I was pregnant with Faith, like I was on a seesaw. Is that what those things are called? Like teeter-totter, like at the playground. And I was on, I think with Griffin and all of a sudden like he like got off of it. And so I just like landed really fast and like fluid just came out of my body. I'm like,
Oh my
I don't
gosh.
know where that came from. You know what I mean? Like all of a sudden my pants were wet. I'm like, was that my water breaking or was that urine or was that? But I know that feeling where you're like, I just damaged something. Like, what did I just do? But thank God, like our bodies are resilient and our babies are resilient and we can get through it.
And the comforting thing with the symphysis pubis dysfunction was my midwife was like, well, a lot of times we see moms with this actually have shorter pushing phases. So I was like, okay, that's good to know.
Yay. Oh my gosh. Well, it's really interesting because I just interviewed a gal, first birth, only 7 hours, and she only pushed for an hour 20, and she had the same thing that you had. So maybe there is something to that.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Not that I would wish that on anyone. Going into the birth, you had done it twice before. Did you have any fears or any kind of like beliefs that might have been blocking some of,
So like I've always like, I'm definitely like, you have to be positive about birth. It's like the way you got through it is to be totally positive about the experience that you're going through. And it's hard, but hard things are good, and it has this great reward at the end. Right. And so, my first birth had been really long, but it actually wasn't as physically challenging as my second birth. It was long because she was in like not a very good position, but then when she eventually came, but it was so drawn out, right? So that it wasn't like really like physically one on top of the other. And so the second birth was just harder because I think part of it was because I was like, second babies are easier, right? But I also had like a lot of prenatal anxiety with my second baby. And I think I underestimated how much the mindset I was in was really going to affect my birth. And he also wasn't in like the greatest position. I just remember it being really hard. And I actually pushed for 2.5 hours with him. But I just remember going into my third birth being like, I just don't want to have to push for that long. Like the one thing I was praying for, I was like, I don't care if labor is long. I just want to have a short pushing phase. Please let me have a short pushing phase.
Yes.
And it was great. I only pushed one time with this third baby.
Oh my gosh. Well, there you go. Your prayer was answered.
Seriously.
Your prayer was answered. So, okay. So you did walk in with those fears. You were a little bit anxious. You were thinking about this pushing. You're like, oh my gosh, please, I can't do this. Did you do anything to like try to release those fears?
Yes. I talked a lot about them with my husband. I was like, this is what I'm afraid of, and this is what I'm going to need your help with. And he was really great about helping me through that. And I remember during labor, it was during transition at one point, I looked at him and I was like, talk so that I don't think this is going to go on for another 8 hours.
Yes.
And he was really great about that. And he was very good at helping me. Like, you're going to be guided through the pushing. It's going to be different than before. You're going to have Cindy, my midwife, helping you and everything. And then I asked my sisters a lot. Like, that was their big prayer for me to have a short pushing phase.
Aww,
so that was
beautiful.
To address it head on, to know what it was, right?
That's awesome. That's
awesome. That gift of short pushing.
Yes, you were given it. Yay. I think the thing with pushing, with that, a lot of women forget, this is where it gets really physical. The beginning parts and, even active labor when your cervix is dilating and stuff like that, you're going through your contractions and stuff. But when you get to the pushing, it can be more active. It's more, just tiring, like you were saying. And so this is, I think, where women forget to eat or have something to drink because you're just so in it. That's like the last thing you're thinking about. It's like, oh, I should have a little nibble on something. So this is where really like diluted juices or honey sticks or just something, because I noticed for myself, you get so fatigued, but just a little hit of some natural sugar can help, give you that endurance to keep on pushing and to get through that. Okay, so it sounds like you did some great work preparing mentally. Physically, it sounded like you had to kind of reduce your activity and, be a little bit more cautious. And so you also saw your chiropractor. Was there anything else you did to prepare as you walked into this birth?
I mean, it was kind of hectic because it was like, we got to the end of pregnancy, we were like, wow, that pregnancy really flew by, because it was like, with the first two, it takes a little longer. But now with the other kids, it's like, oh, wow, we're at the end of pregnancy. Except I was 11 days late. So in the last 3 weeks, I was kind of losing my mind.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Get me out
Faith
of
was
here.
my only late birth, and I almost lost my mind, like literally. And she was only 2 days late. I mean, but those
every
2
day
days
feels like 2 weeks, you know?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Did you take a birth course or anything like that?
Didn't. I actually wanted to take like a hypnobirthing course this time. And I think that next time I would do it because the birth moved really fast. And I was pretty good about like relaxing in between. But I remember thinking in the moment, oh, I wish I had spent more time like kind of like meditating and thinking and everything. And like, I like to do like the Bradley method for kind of like the early part of labor, because it just feels so good to lie down and everything. But I hit a point where I'm like, nope, I want to get up. I got to move. So with this birth, it moved so quickly that I almost like didn't have time to like get into like the relaxed state of mind and body and everything. So by the time I got to, like the end of transition, I had this moment where I was like, my body is like running away from this. And I was like, I have to stop running away because it's going to last longer if I do that.
Yes.
And like the second I like embraced like the really like powerful pressure I was feeling, I was like, oh, I have to push. And then one push later, he was born.
Oh my gosh, that is powerful. So crazy. Accepting what is, surrendering to the birth, facing it, letting it just wash over you was key, right? To keep it going instead of resisting and energetically all that energy to brace and put, trying to push it away.
I almost had to like get myself out of the way. I was like, this is what's supposed to happen, and because at the end it can be really hard to relax, like at that point where you're like, okay, I'm tired and I don't want to do this anymore. I said at one point, I was like, I just want to take a nap. Does anybody want to take over?
Yes, exactly. Like, I'm going to take a nap, wake me up in a couple hours and I'll be good to go.
Exactly.
Sounds like you did some good preparation. Maybe in the future, you're like, I might do a little bit more of that breathing, and kind of that meditative work, because that's always huge. You said you were 11 days late. So tell us how you knew. I'm sure you probably had some Braxton Hicks, but how did you know, like, okay, this is actually labor?
It took like 2 hours into labor for me to admit that this is real labor, because with all my kids, I have prodromal labor. Okay. So starting at like 38 weeks and everything. And my first two were 10 days late. Right. So
oh my gosh, this is your pattern. Okay.
I'm like, all this prodromal labor. My midwife actually did give me an evening Primrose sweep. That day. She had been going to give it to me the day before, but I was not dilated at all. At 10 days, I was not dilated. I had like a long cervix and everything. And so she couldn't do the sweep. The next day she came to do it because I was really losing my mind. and
what a good midwife. Oh, what a good midwife.
She was really great.
Okay, so let's just pause here. So she did a sweep, and then did she put evening Primrose up there too? Like, I've never heard of that combo.
Yes, so she did. And that...
Because that can thin the cervix, yeah.
Yeah, and I had been like taking that too. So, because I had been so demoralized the day before when she was like, well, you're not like dilated at all.
She's like,
all this prodromal labor. So then, she came and she did that, and I like made dinner, and then we had dinner, and I had one big contraction during dinner where I like closed my eyes, and I was like, okay, but I still don't, this is just the way I go. Nothing's happening right now. Yeah. And then we put the kids to bed. After like an hour after they went to bed, I was like, I'm going to go lie down and like, maybe I'll start timing these because, I'm kind of feeling them. And I go and lie down and I'm like, oh, they're a minute and a half apart. And then like I got up and I got the birth supplies out and I was like, oh my gosh, this is really happening. So probably at like 9:00, but I was timing them and I was like, they're short. The contractions were only like 30 seconds long. So I was like, they're really strong and they're close together, but they're really short. She was like, I'll come and I'll just check on the baby. And then I can come back in the middle of the night. I'll sleep over at my friend's house nearby. And I can come back in the middle of the night if things pick up. By the time she came, I was like about to jump into the tub. I was like, get me into that tub. Yeah.
You're like, okay, this is really it. This is it. Okay. Okay. Did she deliver your first two babies?
The second one. I was with other midwives for the first one, who were also wonderful.
Yeah. It's so fun to like have the same one. It's just kind of, it's neat. Take us when things got like more into that active labor where you can't talk, you just have to focus on that one contraction. And what were some of your coping mechanisms during that time?
I relied very heavily on my husband during labor. And he's so calm, like just like nothing ruffles him. And he's so good at like, helping me through everything. And I like physically need him too, because he's like strong, right? And I will like hold on to his neck and just kind of like he'll just like hold me up, right? And then
yes.
I couldn't do it without him, and he loves it. But
Oh, it sounds like he really, like you mentioned earlier, the Bradley. It sounds like he really took to that husband coaching, and like he's almost like your doula, which is so awesome.
Yeah, and you know what? His dad is really similar. Like when they, like the nurses would say about his dad, they'd be like, "Do you want to go and coach these other moms down the hall?" Or whatever.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
But yeah, so he's really great. I think that, you know, when I got up and started getting the birth supplies out, that's when things really started to pick up even more than they already were. And I was like, okay, it's for real. And he was like trying to blow the birth tub up, but I didn't want like the noise during a contraction. And I think that's when I kind of hit it. I was like, you have to turn the pump off. I can't like have that loud blowing up noise while I'm like in a contraction. And he's like moving the car so the midwife can park in our driveway and everything. We're kind of like running around like with two chickens with our heads cut off.
Yes.
So by the time where I really couldn't talk anymore was right before I got into the tub, which I think it was like an hour before the baby was born. And that's when I really,
gosh.
And that offered so much relief. So much.
Water is huge for natural mamas. It is one of the best pain relievers there is. I mean, it's really huge. Yeah. So I'm glad you're able to use that tool because it's just wonderful. Were your other kids asleep? I'm just curious. Were they in bed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing how they can sleep through like two chickens with their heads cut off and cars and blowing up? I mean, it's like God's grace that they can sleep through that.
My husband's like putting towels under their door and an extra sound machine outside the door and everything. And like they were supposed to go to my sister's house, but she like was in the White Mountains because the baby was so late, and like all my health was like kind of like scattered to the four winds by the time he finally arrived.
Oh my god!
Then they drove down and picked up the kids the next morning. It was really sweet to see them come in the next morning and be like, the baby's here.
Yes, it's the best. So it sounds like water was a big coping tool that you used. And then once you got in there, when did it transition to, oh my gosh, I need to push?
So I was in there. I'm not entirely sure how long I was in the water. When I was in, I kept asking the midwife, what can I do to like turn and like get this baby moving, right? Because with the other births, I had been like, I didn't want to move. I was like, I have to stay in this position. But with this birth, I was like, no, I want to rotate this baby. I learned more about like how the hips open up for this birth. And she really walked me through, her and the assistant midwife, they really walked me through positions to get into. So I would switch from like my side with my knee up, one foot against the birth tub. And then I just kept doing that. All of a sudden, I was like, I have to get on my hands and knees right now. And I did. And he was born. Like I heard my voice change. I was like, oh, I'm pushing. And it was more like fetal ejection reflex, which I'd only heard about. And I was like, yes, it sounds amazing. My midwife goes, oh, there's the head. Oh, there's the body.
Oh my gosh. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Wow. So it sounds like you really use movement and hip, alignment and pelvic alignment. It's like you just labor down and then your body, I love it. I mean, what a great experience.
Awesome.
Yeah. So in your overall birth, what do you think was the greatest challenge for you?
I think the greatest challenge was not projecting ahead, because I'd had long labors in the past and was like, I have to not think ahead. And I had thought with the previous two, I'm the kind of person who likes like a silent room, no music, nothing. But with this birth, I told my midwife, the assistant midwife, and my husband, I was like, just don't stop talking. I need distraction so that I'm not thinking about what is ahead. Because the first two were hard. But wonderful, but hard.
No, I totally hear you. It's like just taking it one contraction at a time. I mean, I had a really long first birth, and it was just, that was my whole thing. It was just the dread. Yeah. When is this I was so not in the present moment. And then I think it just makes everything so much more miserable. Yes. So having the distraction. I had an interview with a gal who did her hair, and it took her 4 hours, but it was a huge distraction for all of early labor. That's awesome. Like, that's a great idea. I'm like, hey, whatever works, It really is great. Okay, so when you finally held Edmund came very quickly, because like 1 minute you're like, okay, go on all fours, he's out. Tell us about just holding him for that first time and what that was like for you.
It was like shocking, because I was like, he's here, because I had push, and I was like, then the push will go away and then it will come back and it will go away. I was like prepping for that when I felt that first push, but it was like, nope, he's just here. The push never went away.
Yes, I love it.
I held him. And everybody in the room was just like, whoa, because we were all like, this child is 3 months old.
Oh my gosh, really?
He was 10 pounds.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
I was like, at the beginning of this pregnancy, I'm like 5'5", and I weighed like 108 pounds at the beginning of this pregnancy. And so like, I'm not like a super tall person having this baby. Like everybody in the room was like, where did this baby come from?
Wow. And did you feel like, because sometimes you can tell, like a mom is like really, her stomach is just really, you're like, that's a big baby in there. Like you can just, did you show bigger than the other two?
I get huge with all of my pregnancies. I'm just like straight out in front, like really big. But honestly, like with him, my husband kept saying to me, you're like smaller than you were with the other two.
Oh my gosh.
And I don't know what he was doing, because he actually was like flipping somersaults up until like 38 and a half weeks. He would not stay head down. Wow. So I don't know how he was.
So that was an unexpected surprise. Yeah.
Yeah.
10
but
pounder.
I couldn't stop laughing when he was born, because I was so shocked. I was like, you can like see it. He's here. It's over. That pushing was so easy. I'm like, complete shock.
I mean, your prayer was answered tenfold. To have one push, that's unbelievable.
Gosh.
And to have it be a 10-pound baby and only one push, that is unbelievable. That is to me supernatural. It was God's grace.
It was amazing. It was such a gift.
Oh,
I'm like so thankful.
Yes. Now, was he kind of a good sleeper because he was so big that he had a nice little reserve? And
he is the most easygoing baby in the world. He's a pretty good sleeper. And, you know, my kids all have like the tongue lip ties, and we got that taken like a week later after he was born. And like after that, he was able to nurse super easily and everything. It's just been like, he's been really just an angel baby. I mean,
that is
really
fantastic. Oh, what a wonderful story. Now, is there anything you would say to your pre-birth self, like knowing what you knew after you went through your birth, that would, you know, something you would tell yourself, like, don't worry about this, or, you know, some word of wisdom?
Yeah, I would say to really learn more about like the hip opening movements, because I think that would have made a big difference in my pushing phases with the first two. And I would say go to the chiropractor, because I feel like almost everybody I know who goes to the chiropractor, their labors aren't super long.
Yes, I did with Faith, and she was like 3 hours. You know, that was very fast. I went to a really good, because the first one I didn't go very often, and it showed. The second one I did go regularly, but the third time, and Paloma's birth was great. The third time I went to this expert. I mean, this woman is like, that's all she does. All she does is just work with pregnant moms. She was phenomenal. I mean, Faith was in the perfect position, whatever she did, because there was no obstructions whatsoever. So yes, I totally second that. They are evidence-based. There are studies that show that chiropractic care really does help, not only for your birth experience, but also just for pain, discomfort, all the things, right? Because especially you, I mean, that makes a lot of sense why you did have some of this pelvic pain too. You had a 10-pounder in there, right? That's a lot on the pelvic, floor. So how about to moms, let's say first-time moms are watching this and they're nervous and they're scared. Any words of wisdom you would give them?
I would say birth is like 80% mental. And the thing about the way our bodies work is that like the things happen to us, and birth is going to happen no matter what, right?
So true.
You have to like put yourself mentally in a place that sees it as something positive. You should not listen to anyone's negative stories. I don't think you should, because they just have no place in your birth room, which is going to be different than everybody else's. It's your own experience, right? And you should strive to make it as peaceful as possible, right? Give yourself the environment that would make you feel safe, right? Because that's the most important thing in birth, is that you feel safe and protected. So you need to be with the people who make you feel safe, and you need to have the lighting that makes you feel like it's a private space and everything. And you also need to realize that, I mean, I'm the kind of person who, like, part of the reason I have home birth is because I'm more of an introverted person. So when I'm at home, it's my turf. So I don't feel like I owe anybody else anything, because it's like, this is my space, and I can just go in my room and close the door and everything. Whereas if I'm in another environment, and the birth center where I had my first daughter was amazing, but I still, even though like I loved the experience, I was still like on someone else's turf, and I felt like I had to like do things for them, which was like, silly, because I'm the one in labor.
Yeah, it's like, I don't want to make a mess.
Yeah, they were like, you're the one in labor, just you don't. They were like, you're being so polite.
Yes, I love this.
So I think you need to be in a place where you feel safe and peaceful.
I really love how you talked about your support team. So setting yourself up for success, surrounding yourself with positivity, surrounding yourself with people that believe in the physiological, natural, biological process of birth, that aren't high intervention focused, and who believe in you, right? And so that you're walking into such a safe environment.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think too that like your body is incredible, right? It's like this miracle. And I think it's important to look at that and to say, okay, this is a design we can't improve upon, right?
Yes.
Like I'm talking about like, obviously there are life-saving situations, right? And I'm not disparaging modern life-saving methods, but I do think it's important to, when you want a natural birth, to realize like this is actually very safe because this is the design. Yeah, to just trust that.
Yes.
To trust that this is the way it's supposed to be. And that if you really focus on the positivity and you really try to like relax and stay calm, the chances of you getting to transition and then wanting the epidural are more likely than you just starting labor and being like, I can't handle this, right? But if you're just like really positive and everything, chances are by the time you're saying, I would really like some relief. Is it too late for an epidural? Chances are it is too late for an epidural at that point. And you're almost done. And that's the sign that you're almost done,
Totally. Exactly. You're almost at that finish line. Yeah. Aw. Well, thank you so much, Eileen. What a great story. Oh, and I'm so glad that Mr. Edmund is such a good baby, happy baby, easygoing baby. You need that for the third. One of my girlfriends had her third. Her name is Elena. She's my goddaughter. And they call her Easy E because she's just like, and I think, that's God's grace too, right? Because you got so much going on. But I'm glad to hear everything went well and your prayers were answered for basically a zero pushing labor.
Yeah, I can't stop thinking about how amazing it was.
Yes, that's awesome. It's like a high. You're like, woo, that's awesome. Let's do this again.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, it was such a pleasure. Thank you so much, Eileen. This is going to help so many mamas, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, you too.
Okay, take care. Thanks so much for watching this video. Be sure to subscribe to my channel and ring that bell. Also, head on over to mamanatural.com/updates and sign up for my free pregnancy week-by-week series. Each week, you'll see what's up with baby, what's up with mama, and learn how to have your best, most natural pregnancy. Finally, check out the Mama Natural Birth Course. You've been told that childbirth is scary and something completely out of your control. But I'm here to tell you something different. You can rock your childbirth. And midwife Maura Winkler and I will teach you how. And join the thousands of women just like you who have joined my birth course and have had triumphant natural childbirths. Learn more at mamanaturalbirth.com.